All right, I'm gonna get started and I will continue to let people in off the waiting room as we go. Hello, everyone. Okay, welcome. Welcome, everyone. My name is Randy Zucker. I'm the Director of Arts, Community, and Culture at the JCC, and I want to thank you for joining us this evening for this special Zoom program. We are grateful for this virtual format, which brings people together across distances and creates spaces for shared reflection, dialogue, and community. Before we begin our conversation, it is my pleasure to introduce Lisa Bleich, chair of our One Book, One Community book read committee. And as many of you already know, she is our moderator extraordinary. That's her official title.
My official
We
title.
are deeply grateful for her vision, energy, and countless hours she devotes to coordinating our book selections and keeping this community of readers thriving. Please join me in now welcoming Lisa.
Hello. Thank you so much, Randy. It's my pleasure to be here. Good evening and welcome, everyone. We're so glad you could join us for a conversation with authors. A program like this reminds us that stories have the power to build community and even across a screen. I see a few of the One Book Committee people on the program, so I just want you guys to raise your hand or wave to everybody, and thank you guys all for your countless hours of reading and really helping everybody bring these wonderful stories together. So tonight we are honored to welcome Jennifer Brown. Jennifer is well known for her debut novel, Modern Girls, which was a USA Today bestseller, a Massachusetts Book Award must read, and a 2016 Goodreads Choice semifinalist for historical fiction. Jennifer teaches writing in the Boston area. She holds a BFA in film and television from NYU and an MFA in creative writing from the University of Washington. The Whisper Sister is her second novel. She is joining us today from outside of Boston, where she lives with her two mostly grown children, who occasionally grace her with a visit, the goodest dog ever, and a husband who pretends not to hear it when she says she wants to adopt more dogs. Thank you, Jennifer. It's so nice to have you with us tonight.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, yeah. So first, not I know not everyone will have read the book. So if you could just start off giving us a brief synopsis of what this wonderful book is about, The Whisper Sister.
Sure. So The Whisper Sister covers exactly the years of Prohibition. It starts on the first day of Prohibition and it ends on the last day of Prohibition. And it's about a young girl, Minnie, who immigrates to the United States when she's about 10 or 11 with her mother and her brother. Her father has been in the US for many, many years. He came sent for them, but then World War One, the Great War, broke out, and of course they couldn't get out. So by the time they arrive, her father, Ike, is somewhat of a stranger. Um, so the story is about, she's growing up, becoming an American. Meanwhile, her father has become involved with gangsters and actually real life gangsters, Arnold Rothstein and Meyer Lansky. And he ends up buying a bar, a gin joint. Um, Things happen, and Minnie has to take over the bar. So that is the gist of the novel without any spoilers.
Yeah, well, yeah. We're going to try not to give away any spoilers today, although who knows? It depends on how deep we get into the conversation. Why don't you talk a little bit about the inspiration? I know you did this great presentation. If you can maybe share a little bit with our listeners about the presentation or our viewers.
Sure. So, um, when I was a kid, I was very, very close with my paternal grandfather, Poppy. And Poppy was a frustrated writer, and he was always submitting to Reader's Digest and writing poems for the family. And he really inspired me. He introduced me to the writers I love, Dorothy Parker, Sherwood Anderson, everyone at the Algonquin table, the music, Ella Fitzgerald, Sophie Tucker, Count Basie. And, he was the first person I knew who read the New Yorker religiously, like cover to cover. He was always like a year behind, but he didn't skip a single ad. So he really gave me this love of, he grew up on the in New York, Lower East Side, and then the Upper West Side. They moved around a bit, the Bronx, but New York. And I just became fascinated. And let me share my screen. And I was going to say, like, when we talk about the 1920s, right? I
Mhm.
think we all think of glamour, right? The flop, it was just so exciting and there was so much going on. Um, this is Coney Island in the 1920s. Like, I definitely would have hung out there in my 20s. I love that.
So pretty.
We have all the flappers and the speakeasies. So it just seemed like so much fun. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade started about this time, and Charlie Chaplin. Like there was just so many great things going on, right? It was just super, super glamorous. Um, but I started thinking, right? This is New York in 1924. And I started thinking about my own family. And I thought, were they doing all of this stuff? Like, were they going to Coney Island? Were they, going to speakeasies and watching the Thanksgiving Day parade? And I had to come up with the idea that they probably weren't. So I'm going to introduce you to the Krassenstein family. Um, this is my great grandfather Mishlam and I'm sorry, great great grandfather Mishlam and his wife Freda, who became Fanny and Max. Um, this actually is my grandfather. I actually didn't recognize him when I first saw the photo. My father had to point him out because I mean I had never even seen a photo with him with hair. Like this was like
Wow.
unrecognizable to me. So I started researching them a bit, and I thought, did this family do fun things in the 1920s and early 30s? And the first place I looked was the census, the US Census. And what I found there was they lived at 211 East 10th Street. So, yeah, this is the 1910 census. I looked for photos. This is not their building, but it's the building these are just a couple doors down, right? 225 is not far from 211. Normal looking tenements. Most tenements had one bedroom, two bedrooms. Um, and I looked again at the family living at 211 East 10th Street, and I looked to see how many people were living in the apartment. And there were 11 of them, right? You had Max and Fanny, you had six kids, you had a grandchild, you had two boarders. And it just got me thinking that they weren't living this life. I mean, Max
Right.
worked at a newsstand on the southeast corner of 12th Street and 3rd Avenue. I think
Mhm.
Morris was an iron molder. These weren't people making tons of money. I mean, the fact that they have to all share one apartment and have boarders kind of tells you something. And this is Orchard Street in February 1926 after a snowstorm. And I think if
Mhm.
you told anybody, think about New York in the 1920s, this is not the picture that they would have in their mind, right? You could have said this was, I mean, there are cars, but like 1890. I mean, it just doesn't look like it. And all the swell speakeasies weren't necessarily swell. They were little holes in the wall, most of them. Oops, that's, uh, let me stop share. There were little holes in the wall, and you would just go in and have your drinks. There was no bands, it wasn't fancy. So that's where I got the idea. And I kept thinking, wow, what did they do, right? My grandfather was in his late teens, he was born in 1911. So like what did he do? So that was where
Yeah.
the genesis of it all came from.
That's so amazing that you have that photo of the entire family. Like that, like where did that photo get taken? Like,
It was taken in the backyard when they were on 15th Street, and my grandfather kept it, and that's I have a copy of it. I have I don't have the
yeah,
original.
yeah,
Um
but still,
and
that's
it's
amazing that they were
falling
all
apart.
together. Yeah.
But it's great to have.
Wow, yeah, that is really amazing. My grandmother was born in 1912, so I guess like the same time. And a lot
Yeah.
of as I was reading it, it reminded me of some of the expressions that she would say or some of the things that she might do. I'm not that she would be running a speakeasy, but you never know. Um, so one of the things I wanted to just point out, so in the author's note, you say the world was coming off a global pandemic, race riots were breaking out across the country, immigration quotas kept families apart.
Mhm.
Those deemed undesirable refused entry into the country. Deportations accelerated. Americans were scrutinized for their political beliefs. So when I read that, I was like, wait, this is what's happening like right now. And this was 100 years ago. So when
Yep.
uh, as you were writing that, were you struck by how much history is repeating itself?
Absolutely. I mean, and the things that were said sound the same. So, for instance, in 1924, the Johnson-Reed Act was the Immigration Act that really cut off immigration. Um, you had the Asian Exclusion Act. So,
Mm-hmm.
but the Johnson-Reed Act put in quotas, so only a certain percentage of the population that was already here could come in. However, they set the year where they determined the population is 1890. So that way, if you were desirable, like if you were from the UK or Scandinavia, you could all get in. But if you were undesirable, meaning basically Jews and Italians at that point,
Mm-hmm.
only 10,000 people, Jewish people a year could come in. And this act was supported, obviously by like the Ku Klux Klan, but it was also really supported by the labor unions because they were afraid of cheap labor coming into
Mm-hmm.
the United States. So some of the things, I mean, feel like I read them in the newspaper today.
Yeah, I mean, when I read it, I was like, wait, this is so crazy because it just is like everything that's repeating itself 100 years later. So you did mention how there was a lot of hardship. And one of the things when I first read this book, I think we were talking a little bit earlier, I read it very quickly because I was just trying to see if it was going to be a book that would be good for our community. And I read it on a plane on the way to Milan, and I read it the entire plane, and it kept me, busy and going, and I loved it. Then I reread it last week, and I was struck by how much hardship and how difficult Minnie's life was during
Mhm.
that time. But she was also fierce and resilient and just didn't really let anything stand in her way. So can you talk a little bit about the hardship and what those communities had to face through what your research and
Yeah,
stuff?
I mean, starting with the immigration process, right? I did a lot of research, didn't make it into the book, but it was just stuff I wanted to know for to understand my characters, right? But there were actually two separate people who went undercover on the boats from Europe. And one of them
Mhm.
mentioned that somebody in first class had a fine racing horse they were bringing over, and there was nowhere to put the horse. So they, in where the people in steerage were, they just put up a couple of wooden walls to make a stall, and the horse lived with the people in steerage. And like
Oh,
the
wow.
descriptions of the food served would turn your stomach. I won't even tell you in case anyone still needs to eat because it was just disgusting. And then you get to the United States and at Ellis Island so many people were turned away, right? The boat would be stopped outside in the harbor. And if you were, a doctor comes on board, make sure there's no communicable diseases, measles, typhoid, whatever. And if you were in first class, you were then just taken into New York. And if you were in steerage, you went through Ellis Island. And, you know, did you have enough money? Were you going to, did you have some flaw that they were going to pick out? And I mean, they looked at you very closely. Um, so a lot of people were denied entry and were sent back. And then you make it to the United States, you make it in, and you live in these horrible little tenements, right? It's hard to do. The jobs are really, I mean, backbreaking. You have to work 6 days a week. You did not have Shabbat off. If you owned your own store, perhaps you could close on Shabbat, but because of blue laws, you also had to close on Sunday, and that was really
Right.
expensive for people. Like you couldn't just do that. So you know, you didn't earn a lot of money. A lot of the jobs were seasonal. Clothes came out like twice a year. So when it was like off, you were just out of work. And, you know, that's not even talking about like the sickness in the tenements. Typhoid just ran through it, and there was problems with prostitution, and there were people got sick, and I was really surprised to see how many women died falling out of their windows trying to hang the laundry. That
Oh, wow.
happened.
That
So,
happened.
and then of course you have like the gang, there's violence. I mean, it was a really, really hard life. And I actually pulled back a little bit when I was writing because I didn't want the whole book just to be like one big like, oh,
Well,
sorry.
right. And the first time I read it, it didn't feel like that. It felt very, I wouldn't say glamorous, but definitely Minnie is a spark plug. And that was one of the things I was wondering because I was thinking about like, she's so young. So she comes when she's 10 and she's already getting involved in what you would call criminal activity with Meyer Lansky when she's quite young, right? And she's not afraid of it at all. She just moves forward. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about I guess, the illicit element of Jews coming over and getting involved in the mob, getting the mafia, the
Mhm.
Jewish mafia, and why that was such a pathway for so many of them.
Well, again, if you think about, talking about like you can be working at an iron press, again,
Mhm.
seasonal, long days, 6 days a week. It's backbreaking work, not a lot of money. Or Ike worked as a driver for Arnold Rothstein, right? I mean, you keep clean, it would be appealing, right? It's an easier
Yeah,
way to make money. And because prohibition, I think, was so widely despised and so blatantly um, flouted. Um,
ignored. Yeah,
I think that it wasn't considered that bad, right? I
it
mean,
didn't seem like it. I mean, Minnie did was never like almost. I mean, Ike sort of said these. It was like it was dangerous, but
Mhm.
it felt like nobody really cared that it was illegal
Right.
because like it was sort of a law that, well, it's illegal, but who cares? Like we're going to just do what we want to do, but it's still going to be dangerous. And I almost felt like Minnie, almost like she was doing a service because she really created this very warm community of
Mhm.
for people to come and drink and hang out.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, talking about her youth, I read a lot of books of the day, and in Call It Sleep by Henry Roth, the main
Oh,
character at 4 is sent out. Mom's like, go outside and play, and New York City, Lower East Side, right? There
yeah.
was just a different sense of what childhood was, right?
Hmm.
Children, there was a lot of child labor. Um, you know, it was, may I share that picture of
Sure.
let me see,
Yeah.
pull that up. Um, because this one really, really got to me. So this is a picture of a child here who is they're embroidering. And the mom says that, she's a really great worker. She's small for her age because she's been sick so much. She doesn't go to school very often. And I believe it says, if I can slide up, they make $2 a week.
Hmm.
So, and the father is out of a job. So, Minnie had a better life than this, right? Because this was realism
Right.
for
That's a
a lot of
comparison.
people. Um, so I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing what people did to survive and to have all of us end up here.
Yeah, no, it's true. And it's interesting. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting was I guess the conflict between so Ike's Minnie's father, so he comes and he's the one who starts off on the speakeasy pathway,
Mhm.
and he's very much like you can't trust anybody. You can only stand up for yourself, and don't take any charity from the rabbi. Like they're not your friends. They're going to want something from you. And then her mother, Faggy, is very much uh, you know, clinging to the old traditions, doesn't really learn English. She sticks with Yiddish. She's very much a part of the community. And there's a very strong sense of faith and superstition and all the things that you would bring from the old country. So, can you talk a little bit about how you wanted to juxtapose those two different conflicting views on Minnie and how it impacted her.
Well, I don't know if anybody has seen the movie Hester Street with Carol Kane. It's a great movie. And that sort of, I think, gave me some ideas for that because, Carol Kane comes over, her character, and her husband has been here. And her husband is shaved and wears hats. And he's like, stop wearing a wig and dress nicer and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, but no, I believe in this stuff. I want to stay with it. But the other one's like, that's not American. And I wanted something a little bit like that, but I wanted Ike and Faggy to really get along, right? I think
Yeah.
I mean, they were really in love. Um, and I think that, you know, Ike was disillusioned. I mean, Ike probably saw a lot working with gangsters, and a lot of people assimilated. The Forward, the newspaper, had a column called Bintel Brief, which was a Dear Abby kind of column, answered by the editor, Abraham Kahan. And I read all of these, they collected a lot of the letters into books. And I read a lot of letters where it was like, my parents are, religious, but I'm a free thinker, which is what they called it. And I don't want to do, I don't want to say a yard site. And what do I do? Or there was one where a guy was like, my kids are, more religious and we don't do any of this and we've assimilated. So, you know, I wanted Ike to try to make Faggy happy by, she did her thing. But,
Hmm.
everyone in the community spoke Yiddish. Everyone had these Landsmannschaften, which is like these groups based on where you came from, your countrymen. So like the
Right. I think I saw
rabbi
that
and
in
your,
if you go to the Tenement Museum, don't they have that? Don't they show that in the Tenement Museum? I think there's
they
one there.
might, I'm not sure. I've
Yeah.
been to the Tent Museum, but
Yeah.
I don't recall that.
Yeah.
Um, but and I think there are, a lot of people, do things because they're supposed to do it. So like Ike in the old country, maybe, he knew he was supposed to do this, like he was supposed to be religious. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
And then he comes to the United States and maybe his faith wasn't that strong. I mean, my great grandfather, my different side, um, my great grandmother was religious. She like they kept kosher, they did all this stuff, and my father used to say that my great grandfather would come home after Yom Kippur and have to like force himself to eat because he'd really snuck out for lunch, right? Like he didn't observe,
Okay.
but his wife observed. So he had to like play along. So I think you get a lot of these differences, and I
Mhm.
wanted them to maintain that. I wanted them to have these differences, but to still be a strong couple.
Yeah, and you did a great job with that.
Thank
And
you.
the other thing I thought was interesting, which I didn't really think about, but the rabbis were the ones who were supplying the liquor. And
Not all,
so,
not
not all
always.
of them, right? Not
But
always, but I was
but the
just
thing
wondering how
is,
pervasive was that? And was it just rabbis or was it other clergy
oh
as
no, no,
well?
no. So, and actually in the book, Minnie asks her Catholic friend, talk to your priest, see if you can get us
Yeah.
alcohol. But there were a couple loopholes. One of them was alcohol could be sold for religious purposes,
Mhm.
and they could also be prescribed by a doctor. There were actually four distilleries that remained open legally during Prohibition for those purposes. So, like if you have a really bad toothache, your doctor could prescribe you a little bit of bourbon or something like
Mhm.
that. Um, but no, absolutely. I will say that, most rabbis, I'm sure, were on the up and up, but there were some people. Let's see, go to another um, picture. Let's see where it is. So, uh, let's see, where is it? Okay, well, first of all, we have that. And let me open both of these. So, this is a article from the New York Times, and you guys can't see that yet. What it says is wine buyers' names puzzle even rabbis. They can't tell whether those with Christian appellations are not Orthodox. So, what they're saying is many Orthodox Jews bear non-Jewish names, and it's difficult for a rabbi to determine, so we just have to trust you.
Right.
They were fined, and, you know, it wasn't just the Jewish community.
Yeah.
It was, like I said, there were issues with every community. And this is a photo I particularly like. This is a photo from the New York Times. Uh, you know, that
Yeah.
you could buy wine, right? So
Right.
this is probably one of those
For
situations
sacramental
where like,
purpose, just like medical marijuana, right before it became legal. It's
yeah,
sort of a similar idea.
exactly.
But
Exactly.
I also imagine that, especially during the Depression, when
Hmm.
there wasn't a lot of support, because I thought what was interesting about what you wrote was a lot of the moral ambiguity. So there
Hmm.
wasn't really a right or a wrong. I mean, there were people that were doing things that were perhaps illegal. Obviously, there were things that were done that were absolutely wrong.
Right.
But there was also this area where, like, the rabbi was supporting the whole community and he supported everyone in the community. And he didn't, there really wasn't a lot of judgment on
Hmm.
Minnie or Malcha, right? I mean, he brought her in, and then she was supporting them, I guess, either out of guilt or obligation to her mother by giving donations when she was making money. So there was like this, and you were also talking about Meyer Lansky and some of the things that he did, that there was that, the conflict, like a bad person could do good things or a good person
Hmm.
could do bad things. It's not so black and white.
Right. Right. And and I think that originally Minnie starts giving tzedakah and because her mother did and
Hmm.
to honor her mother. But I think she formed a genuine relationship with the rabbi, right? She formed like
Yeah,
she really went to lean on him and it was the first time she sort of thought maybe my dad isn't right about everything.
right.
Because he was a good guy and I think like during the Depression so many people needed help
Yeah,
and they turned to who they could. So, you
yeah,
know,
no, it makes sense.
yeah.
What was one of the most interesting things you learned about, or surprising things you learned about in your research?
The way Lysol was used.
Yeah, okay.
Lysol was a feminine hygiene product.
Okay.
And Randy's mouth just opened. That to me was both frightening and hysterical, right?
Right.
So, sure.
Like Windex in the my big fat Greek wedding.
Yeah, no, it was just it was yeah, so let's see. Um I'll do this. Okay. Oops, sorry. The Lysol was advertised for feminine hygiene. This one says, what have I done? Her listlessness, her lack of vivacity, it's gradually taken the joy out of the marriage. She doesn't know what causes it. And I love this. Very often, the loss of energy and vitality during the years following marriage is the wife's own fault.
Of course.
So they say that feminine hygiene incorrectly practiced, may have irreparable consequences. So you can write away for a book on how to use Lysol. This is from Cosmopolitan in 1924, right? So these were,
Mainstream magazines that were
mainstream
promoting.
magazines
Yeah.
advertising Lysol as a product to help you restore your vitality by using it as a feminine hygiene product.
How long did that last? Do you know how long that was a thought that you could use it?
I mean, I heard things about through the 30s, and I don't know. I don't know about after that, but
Yeah,
yes.
interesting. So, the other thing that was interesting was just about, like, the wood wood alcohol. And so
Hmm.
Minnie gets poisoned by one of her suppliers when she has wood alcohol. And then I think I heard you say that it was something that was promoted by the government, or it was inadvertently it was promoted by
No,
the
not
government.
inadvertently on purpose.
Oh, yeah.
So
Right.
I
But not
printed
to
out
drink it, but just to have it, right?
no, so they were trying to poison the alcohol. So people, yeah. So this is an article for December 30th, 1926. Government to double alcohol poison content and also add benzene. And there was an article, there was Wayne B. Wheeler's the general counsel of the Anti-Saloon League, and he said the government is under no obligation to furnish the people with alcohol that is drinkable when the Constitution prohibits it. The person who drinks this industrial alcohol is a deliberate suicide.
Oh,
And then
wow.
you have Senator Edwards, a Democrat of New Jersey, um, said that. Mr. Wheeler sought to justify the poisoning of industrial alcohol by the government by classifying deaths from drinking the poisonous beverage as deliberate suicide and calling bootleggers potential murderers. I call it legalized murder, and the government is an accessory to the crime. So the idea was to put this stuff in there because people would try to burn off the bad stuff or
Okay.
still it out, but it didn't work. It didn't
Didn't
work.
work. People
And
still drank it. Yeah.
yeah, and it says here 1926, the city toll maybe 800. There were 30 holiday victims, and they also talked about death tolls for 1926 in other places. So,
Wow.
um, yeah, the holiday victims it says was 30 now, but they in let's see, in Boston in 1925 there were 197 deaths from poison alcohol. And even in smaller places, like in Utica, there were 6 deaths from alcoholic poisoning and 4 deaths from chronic alcoholism. Um,
Interesting.
you know, it
And
was
I guess there was nothing, and so there was no legal recourse because the government was the one who did it in the first place. So
no
they were
legal
probably
resource
like, okay,
because you're
yeah,
drinking something that's
something that you're not
illegal.
supposed to be drinking. But
Yeah.
on the flip side of it, Minnie became quite the mixologist.
Hmm.
So how fun was that to write for
Oh, that was
you?
pretty fun. It was fun to write, but it was more fun to research.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. So what was your favorite drink that you came up with?
I, I can't even tell you because my husband became the bartender and I would give him these books and I'm like, pick something. And we had different things almost for a while I was trying to record what I liked and didn't like, but that didn't last for very long. But there were, cocktails had existed before Prohibition, but they became immensely popular during Prohibition because they covered the taste of the nasty
Yeah,
alcohol.
alcohol. Right,
So,
right.
yeah, I mean, unless you were rich and could get your stuff straight from, overseas or Canada, what you got was watered down or supplemented with industrial alcohol or, yeah.
And do you think that that those speakeasies were so popular, even though they were kind of, not that nice, as you said, just because the tenements were so overcrowded that there was like another place for people to go? Do you think
They were
that's
all over. At one point, there was a report I read that said there were about 15,000 speakeasies probably in New York City. They were everywhere because people just like to drink. People, they
yeah,
resented not being able to drink, and after work just wanted to grab a beer sometimes, just a place to go because there weren't really places to go. You had a
right,
tiny tenement apartment with all your kids and your
right,
wife because it was usually the man who went out drinking because unaccompanied women generally weren't allowed in bars because they were suspected to be prostitutes. Um,
right.
so I
So
yeah,
would that have happened? So in Minnie's speakeasy, she makes it open to women to come in.
yeah.
Would that have happened? Were there places where women could have come in, or was that something that
I
was
actually don't know that one. I don't know.
okay?
I mean, I have to imagine there were some. I mean, there were also actually there were gay speakeasies, there were gay bars,
Sure.
even
Yeah,
back then.
yeah.
Um, Obviously, they were illegal on 2 levels because, of course, it was illegal to be.
Right. It was illicit to right to be right.
So, yeah, but yeah, so I'm not 100% sure on that. I will say that.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Jewish mafia. So were there a lot of factions and betrayals within them? I think you had mentioned once that there was some, I guess, mergers between the Jewish mafia and the Italian mafia. And
Well, actually, the Jewish mafia and the Italian mafia were worked together very well, and that's partially due to Meyer Lansky. So all the gangsters in the novel are fictional except for Meyer Lansky and Arnold Rothstein.
Mhm.
And Meyer Lansky immigrated to the U.S. In 1911. He was born in 1902, so he was just a kid, and he was small. He was really scrawny, and Charlie Lucky Luciano, who wasn't called Lucky in those days, hit him up for protection money. Says, I'm going to beat you up unless you pay me. And Meyer Lansky was like, no way. Like, I'm not going to do that. And Luciano really respected him for that. And they became really good friends. And they're the ones credited with bringing the Italian and the Jewish mafias together to have the American mafia. But it all started with
I
Arnold
don't know if that's such a
Rothstein.
good thing to be credited for.
I mean, it all started. So Arnold Rothstein was the original head honcho, right? So
Yeah.
Arnold Rothstein is probably familiar to people because he was the model for Meyer Wolfstein in Great Gatsby. He was Nathan
Uh-huh.
Detroit in Guys and Dolls. You know,
Right.
Damon Runyon wrote all these short stories about the brain. He was the brain. Um, he saw the potential of prohibition early on. Most people were thinking about stills and how to make your own, but he said, we're gonna go to England and we're gonna bring stuff over. And I will say he never drank or smoked, so this was something he just did.
Yeah.
And he was, old. He was born in 1882, so he was, about 20 years older than Lansky. But Lansky and Rothstein met in Brooklyn. They had a mutual friend, and they met at that mutual friend's son's bar mitzvah.
Okay.
So uh, Arnold Rothstein saw real potential in Lansky, thought that, he looked hungry. And so he set him up running a car and truck rental business on the Lower East Side on Cannon Street because what better way to have trucks coming in and out with,
Oh,
bootleg
that makes sense.
booze
Yeah.
than a truck?
Yeah.
No one's going to question it.
Right.
So Meyer Lansky was the basis of Hyman Roth and Godfather 2, if anybody's seen Godfather 2. And in fact, Lee Strasberg played him. And Meyer Lansky called him after the movie came out and said, you know, you didn't do a bad job, but couldn't you have made me look a little nicer? Um, but I think that he was part of the Bugsy Myers gang, being the Meyer of the Bugsy Siegel, and he and
Yeah.
Bugsy Siegel like were big in gambling later on, and he was part of a group called Murder Inc. He was not necessarily a good guy, but at the start of World War II, like before we actually got involved in it, um, he was speaking with a judge, and the judge said to him, like, there are all these rallies going on, the German American Bund, which was the American Nazis.
Mhm.
And he said, can you do anything about it? And he said, yeah, I can do something. So he went into the rallies and they threw fireworks and they started fights. He was a go-between between the government and the mob. He put men on docks to prevent stoppages and sabotage. And he was actually offered money to be paid by the government for doing this work. And he said, I am a Jew and I feel for the Jews in Europe who are suffering. They are my brothers. And he wouldn't take any money. And after the war, after 1948, the Haganah came to him and said, there's an arms embargo, but somehow all these arms are getting into Egypt. They're coming from Pittsburgh. Can you help us? And he said, of course. And he worked with the dock workers, and some of those arms mysteriously fell off the boat, never made it anywhere. Other ones were mistakenly put on boats going to Israel. So, he did help. He helped when he could. Um, he tried to make Aliyah when he was older. He really, really wanted to retire in Israel, and he moved to Israel.
Mhm.
As a Jew, the law of return enabled him to do that.
Right.
But he was the court case that decided if you have a background that's not, completely legal, they don't have
Right.
to accept you as a citizen. And he actually ended up moving and retiring to New York City, but that was really, really disappointing to him.
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool. Another part of the book was a lot about, we talked a little bit about Faggy, but Faggy was old school, more traditional. She was of the belief that she wanted to have kids no matter what, no
Mhm.
matter what cost.
And I don't want to get into
Yeah.
any spoilers, so.
No, I'm not giving any spoilers away. And so Minnie ended up taking, helped out a lot, taking care of the two younger kids. So was there anything that you learned in your research about just child rearing at that time and how things were different than they are now?
When I write, I have to go and say, so Minnie went out and she wore, and I put in brackets in all capitals, what did she wear? Because mainly because of my research into childcare, I found this book from 1920, and it was Healthy Babies, a volume devoted to the health of the expectant mother and the care and the welfare of the child. I mean, I think I read the entire book cover to cover, even though, my kids are grown. Um,
Did you learn
It
anything? Any good tips?
so one of the things is I think I have this on my computer. Um, let's see, oh yeah, oh yeah, I got it. The my son's gonna kill me when I say these things. So my son was a late potty trainer
Uh,
because I didn't read this, which says training the child to use the chamber for bowel movements may be commenced as early as 2 months. Um,
crazy.
It also talks about the serious problem of prominent ears and how you're supposed to take care, how you should lay the baby down and put a cap on them. It says in extreme cases, it's permissible to use tiny strips of adhesive plaster to hold the ear back.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
but it says, if that doesn't work, a slight operation later in life can help cure the deformity. And the book was just full of these things, like
Wow.
babies are born deaf. And I mean, just yeah. And so I lost an entire day and a half, I think, of writing time reading this book.
So tell us a little bit about your process. Like, are you more of a pantser? Are you more of a plotter? Like, how do you go through it?
I like to say I'm a plantser, and of course, pantser is someone who writes by the seat of their pants, and a plotter is
Yeah.
someone who just outlines. So I do a rough outline. I do like I knew where I wanted to start. I knew where it wanted to end. I had certain points that I knew I wanted to do. And from there, like I don't write outline out each chapter. I do later. I do what's called reverse outline, so I can see what's there and what needs to be put in and what's too much. Um, but I find that that's easier because so many times when I'm writing, things take a left turn,
Yeah.
and it goes in a completely different direction than what I thought it would. So yeah.
Was there anything that you hadn't like that you really wanted to get in there, but you just couldn't do it, or
I
something
had
that
a
you were
lot of
really,
scenes that I had to
yeah,
cut because it was just too long. Um I had more of Minnie and Max, Max, her brother, at Ellis Island and the whole
okay,
process they went through.
right.
I had, yes.
I was gonna say let's talk about. We didn't actually talk about that. So Max is Minnie's brother, and Max is kind of more on the straight and narrow. He wants to be a lawyer, and the
And
whole
not represent the
immigration process.
mafia.
And right, and not represent the mafia, but probably he would if he had to, right? If Minnie got in trouble, I think
Oh,
if
if
Minnie
Minnie
got
got
in
in trouble,
trouble,
yes.
I think he would help her out. And so he gives her very clear directions about immigration, and then things happen. So can you talk a little bit about that law or that process and how it can be so hard
So the
to get through?
process was just, grueling. And I don't think that's changed. I think it's grueling
Yeah,
today,
I
but
don't
in
think so.
different ways. But,
Yeah,
you had to file your declaration of intention, and then you had to wait so many years, and you had to do your petition, and then you had to go in and, you know, come in with witnesses, and they had to vouch for you, and then you had to take the test. I mean, it was a long process. And there was a book I found called How to Become an American Citizen. I actually bought a little copy of it, and in the book Max leaves it for Minnie and underlines the part that says people who violate the Volstead Act won't be able to get citizenship. Um, and you could be not necessarily rejected, but any little thing that you get wrong. I mean, there's some things if you get wrong, they'll fix it. But some things, according to this book, you have to start all over again. And, my own different great grandfather, I found his papers. And the first time he applied to become an American, he made it all the way up to the court date, but one of his witnesses didn't show up.
mm,
But that was his problem, and he had to actually start from the beginning with
wow,
a new petition. Um, so it was a long and fraught process.
yeah, yeah. I don't think it's changed any.
Mm-mm.
Um, Yeah. Have you thought, I mean, I know we talked about this before, but like if you were so lucky to get a movie deal, like have you thought about whom you'd cast in the various roles?
Um, a little bit. I'm I know more actresses than actors, but I see somebody like I think her name is Natasha Dyer. She was in Stranger Things. She was the sister. but I like using Jewish characters, like Jewish actors for Jewish characters, but
Yeah.
she's sort of, I think she has that. Um, Haley Steinfeld would probably be a good Sylvia, who's like just wild
Yeah.
and out there. Um,
Yep.
this is sort of a strange one, but I think that for Faggy, I could see Sarah Silverman.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the
Or
men, I
Jessica.
really don't know my actors very well. I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, you could have that well, he's probably a little bit old, the guy who's in that Nobody Wants This. He's probably a little bit too old to
Yeah.
play the rabbi.
You can play an
To be the
adult Max, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, let me open it up to questions. Are there any questions? I should have said in the beginning if there's any questions to put them in the chat. Does anyone have any questions?
I think there is one in the chat.
Let me see
Modern
what it
Girls is
says here.
classified as historical fiction, so much research. It's called a
Yeah,
novel or maybe a
it should be
historical
called a
novel.
novel.
So
Who determines the
basically,
genre?
it's a novel because it's the story is fiction. So many, and same with Modern Girls, right? I have the facts of what surrounds them, but Minnie and in Modern Girls, Dottie and Rose are 100% creations of my imaginations. Um, as far as historical, anything that takes place more than 50 years ago is considered historical, which is kind of odd now because that means the early 70s
Yeah.
qualify as historical fiction, which is a little frightening. Um, but yeah, if I had done the research and then wrote about, Texas Guinan was an actress who worked at the El Fay Speakeasy, if I'd written about her, using my research, then it's, nonfiction. But because so much is made up, it's fiction.
So it's that right. So it's not considered historical fiction because it's fiction just set in a historical time. Is that kind of the
Well,
difference?
so I think the question was like, jump. Yeah, no, the yeah, I think that, anything written about the early 1900s is historical fiction. I mean, assuming it's fiction. I mean, there's also historical. No, I
I
think
think she was saying they're
the
classified
books are both
differently.
classified as historical fiction. Um, they're usually put on historical fiction lists and stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I
I
don't know.
don't think they're,
It
yeah.
doesn't say on here. I see that you had Marjan Kamali as one of
I love
your
Marjan. Marjan is
most yeah,
amazing.
yeah, we interviewed her earlier this year, or actually earlier last year, or late last year. So she was great. Yeah, it's Boston, another Boston author. So
Yeah, she lives the
uh,
next town over.
yeah, that's nice. Are there any other questions here?
Oh, well,
I
novel
guess
is
the
it
cover
says the
says
cover
novel.
says novel, and inside it says a work of fiction, but a novel by definition is fiction. Fiction doesn't have to be a novel because obviously you could have a short story that's fiction, you can have a novella that's fiction, but novel is fiction. You know, nonfiction would be memoir or something that's reported, politics. So
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure. I have to look at the other one there, but see. Does anyone have any other questions outside of the classification process or anything?
I think people could also like raise their hand or
I'm
Yeah, you can
just
always unmute
unmuting.
yourself.
Yeah, and anyone can unmute if they want to ask a question. But can you tell us, Jennifer, that was so interesting and fun. Thank you so much. Can you tell us, are you working on something now?
I
Something
am.
new?
I am. I'm going to be a little bit vague just because, as I said, when things take a left turn, like things could be very, very different. Um, but the next book is, I feel like I'm going backwards. The first one was 1935. This one is Prohibition. The next one actually goes from 1911 to 1926 with a little brief jump ahead for the very ending. And this one actually takes place in South Florida and takes place in Miami and Miami Beach. I think most people don't know that Miami Beach is man-made. It was dug from the ocean. It was dredged up, as were many of the islands down there. And a lot of people don't know that Miami Beach was restricted. So south of Fifth Street, Jewish people could live, but north of Fifth Street, no Jews were allowed. Um, and so, of course, I have a Jewish woman who wants to build houses north of Fifth Street.
Okay. Another feisty female character.
Another feisty female character.
I like that. Yeah. Well, Michelle wanted to know if your next book is based on
Yeah.
that era because you've become quite an expert on that time frame.
It's funny because it's fun because like a lot of the things bleed, like,
Yeah.
Modern Girls I learned about, you know, pregnancy and that's actually, I like a lot of the things I learned about New York for that book worked for this one. And the stuff I'm working for the prohibition stuff works for the next one because
Mhm.
it takes place, partially during the same time. So yeah.
And how did you get that idea?
So I'm from Miami Beach.
Oh, okay.
I grew up there and it was just it was a fascinating place and when I grew up in Miami Beach it was derelict. um I was looking at the Eden Rock Hotel, which is like super fancy now and it's like so expensive, but that's where my high school prom was held because it was so cheap.
Right. Okay.
So it's changed so much over the years and I sort of want to capture some of that.
Yeah.
I think Ellen has a question.
Let me see where the question is. Oh,
Yes, I
she
do.
said,
You
oh,
seem fascinated by all the research you go into writing your books. I'm wondering if you've ever thought about writing a nonfiction work because you like the research and the knowledge so much.
I don't think so because I just my mind wants to make things up. I think that I find a good fact and I want to think about like, well, how would that affect my character? Like, what would she do in this situation? Whereas you have to stick to the facts in nonfiction. Like,
Right.
there's no leeway. So I definitely prefer fiction.
Interesting.
I was just wondering so you said this book in the like the day prohibition started and the day it ended.
Mhm.
Did things change for the Meyer Lansky's and the mafia and when it was legal now for alcohol? They just
Well,
went into
they moved
facilities.
into, I mean, so one of the things I did not emphasize in the book at all is that they also were in narcotics, right?
Yeah, okay.
They trafficked, heroin and cocaine. And then, after Prohibition, as we get into the 40s and 50s, gambling. I mean, they moved
Yeah.
into gambling and I mean, there's always something else.
Right. There's always another vice.
There's
Right. So
always
that
another
yeah.
way to make your money.
Yeah. No, that's very true. Very, very true. There any other questions? Anyone else have anything you want to?
Karen, one of our readers, said she's from Miami too. And so we look forward to reading your next book. I feel like most of the things that we read or watch that occur in that time period, turn of the century, are like take place in New York. And I don't know anything about what happened in Florida then and what it was like. So,
I'm having so much fun when I'm writing it. And, it's just a time period that I love because my own family, I feel like I have a connection to it, you
mhm.
know?
Right.
So you won't find me writing about 1800s New York because I mean, I love reading about it, but I'm not going to be passionate enough to write about it.
Is there a lot of research on Miami at that time frame?
Oh, yes. Well, for one of the things is that, the newspapers. Like I have access to newspapers from that time, and that gives you so much information. And yeah, because it's early 1900s, there is documentable things to find, photographs of, Miami Beach when it was all mangroves. And so yeah, there's actually more research than I really know how to handle. This is like there's just so much.
Right. You need to have AI to go through it all and pull it out
No,
for you.
So I will not use AI for anything. The only thing I've ever used AI for is I was trying to figure out what a worker would wear, a male worker would wear in, I can't remember what year it was, 19 something, like, because I couldn't find it. And then once I found it, I went and then had to like verify it because I don't trust
Of
AI
course.
at
Yeah, no, I
all.
know. That's right. Yeah. When
No.
did your family go to Miami? Like what, did they
My
start in New York
grandparents
and then?
went, I think in the 60s. My family moved there in 1973. I was born in New York, but we moved to Miami when I was very little. We moved around a little bit. So I was in South Miami originally, and then I ended up on Miami Beach. Karen, where are you from?
You have to unmute yourself, Karen.
Okay,
Yeah.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So my family moved from New Jersey to North Miami Beach when
Oh.
I was in 1959.
Did you go to NMB?
No, I went to private school, and Meyer Lansky's grandson was in my graduating class.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
I have memories of Meyer Lansky, who was like
Wow.
this family guy. He was just a regular family guy. I didn't know that he was in this world
Yep.
for, till I was like a senior. And then I started to realize what was going on.
Yeah, no, I mean
My
that's what I say. He's sort of an
graduating.
enigma, right? Because there's this dichotomy of this
Yeah.
like mafia guy and this.
He was just a family guy, and his grandson was my friend.
Yeah,
It was just weird to find all that out. Yeah.
that's
So I'm really
great.
looking forward to your book and about Miami. And my high school boyfriend's grandfather was a bootlegger in
Oh,
Miami, in Miami. So I'm curious to see if that's going to come up for your next book in your information.
I have a little bit on it, but that's not there's definitely some bootlegging, but it's not the heart of the novel.
Huh,
Not like The Whisper Sister.
got it. Got it.
Great.
What a great
All right.
connection. Thank you, Karen, for
Funny. This
sharing.
is a
Yeah,
funny.
that's
So
good.
funny.
Now I want to learn all about
Amazing.
Miami in that time frame. That's
Yeah.
great. All right. We have time for one last question. If there's any last question, anyone else have a burning question they want to ask? No? All right. Well, thank you, Jennifer. This was amazing. It was so interesting to hear your process and hear all of the history behind what you wrote, and was such a great story. So thank you so much for
And
sharing with us.
thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored to get to chat with all of you guys.
Yeah,
Thank
our pleasure.
you. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Jennifer. The Whisper Sister was such a great read, such a
Yeah.
great story. We enjoyed it so much. If you haven't read it yet or want to gift it to someone, we put the link in the chat to purchase it, but we will also send it to everyone tomorrow again. And thank you to Karen Sanders for all your help in planning and to all of our readers. Thank you
Yes.
both so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.